You spent countless hours in the garage with your dad. Now investing in that old car and working on it with your son reminds you of him. And his legacy lives on. Fund your passion with a low-interest home equity line of credit from Bank of Blue Valley.
Oh, what a surprise you there.
Yeah, Scott, man, I thought I was getting a little worried. I thought I was flying solo.
I know. No. I always try to make Aaron laugh. And but today you've decorated your office a little bit at Bank of Blue Valley. So what's new?
So in addition to the plant from last time, thanks to our marketing director, little artwork to go in the back now. So I think it's coming together nicely. Nothing when we started talking, it's starting to come around every week, a little something new.
That's right. Well, Lisa and Beth are doing a great job. And then also, if you're tuning in, please let us know where you're tuning in from. And this is the point in the show where we say we're completely lost without Aaron Folk, but we will talk about Bank of Blue Valley and Burns and McDonnell. So speaking of that, Will, what is going on new in your world that you're enjoying and having fun doing?
Yeah, so I would just say a couple new accolades for Bank of Blue Valley that I'm really proud of. Kansas City Business Journal just gave the rankings of the top commercial banks in Kansas City, and Bank of Blue Valley is in the top 10. Growing. Our assets are over 1.4 billion now, and we've been honored with the being added to Forbes Best Bank, or the list of Forbes Best Banks. So a lot of great things happening at Bank of Blue Valley, and just trying to keep this momentum up.
So if you had to say one of your favorite industries right now that's really, really growing that you're enjoying working with, what would it be?
That's a great question. I think our guest today is going to be someone that is in that category of being involved in a lot of different projects, seeing where some companies are growing, how the real estate footprint's changing. So I think as far as investment and owner-occupied real estate, it's a really exciting time to be involved in either of those spaces.
Man, Aaron thinks we can't do this on our own, but that was a perfect segue. I think we're on top of it. So speaking of our guest, it's a huge honor that he was willing to join. I give all his credit to his mom, Linda, who's been a really good mentor to Aaron and I. And Linda may be texting you, Aaron, because she's figured out how to jump on. And if you go to the Drinks with Leaders page on LinkedIn, you can find it. We also stream from YouTube and Facebook as well. But when you think of the history of Kansas City, we're really not that old of a city. And when you think of a fifth generation company, very few companies are here today. But more importantly, the size of our guest, his organization, and he always gives credit away. So Will and I are going to do our best to pull that out of him on everything that he's achieved. But when I think of folks like Terry Dunn or Peter Maluk, I think of this CEO and president right up there. The work that he's done throughout the city, the work that he does throughout the country. It's amazing that we have him on the show. So I'm really appreciative that he trusted us to be on the show. So without any further ado, Tyler Nottberg. There we go.
All right. I like that walk-up music. I did actually start to get a little bit worried when you said the size of our guest. I was like, did I
Yes.
a little larger on the camera?
Yeah, it was shocking when we were talking about Aaron's rowing and you were talking about rowing. I mean, you are built for rowing, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about you. And so you're going to divert the attention away. I know you give credit to a lot of your associates. So we're going to do our best to talk a little bit about your background. But I'm going to use what Aaron says all the time. Who are you? What do you do? And how'd you get to Kansas City?
Well, so I grew up in Kansas City. I went to Pemday and then Pembroke Hill. And then I took a roundabout route to get back here. I went to Middlebury College up in Vermont. I went to graduate school over in England at Oxford University. And then my wife and I, we had gotten engaged. We moved from England to Washington, D.C., and then back to Kansas City about 20 years ago. I had grown up with a lot of interests in international relations and politics and languages and a lot of traveling. And I did never think that I was going to be involved with U.S. engineering, which had been in my family for a long time. My dad actually passed away from cancer in 1997 when I was still in college. And the organization, control of the organization, majority control, had passed out of the family for the first time ever. But through my dad and a number of the individuals who were involved on the board level, the opportunity was there for me to come back and get involved. And my wife and I, Lee and I, made that decision that we wanted to do that. And so we came back and we were able to repurchase a controlling interest in U.S. engineering again about 15, 20 years ago. And so that's what brought us back to Kansas City. She's originally from Kansas City. I'm originally from Kansas City. Our daughter had been born when we were living in D.C., and it was going to be great to be close to family again. And so we made that decision, and it's the best decision we've ever made in our lives. Besides marrying each other, at least, that's my opinion.
So Will's going to ask some business questions, but before that, studying international business, what do you do when you first get back to Kansas City? Because your organization has a wide breadth of different services that you provide and build. But what was your first couple of years like back in the company?
Well, I really didn't know much about the construction industry. And so I spent a lot of time early on just learning what it is that U.S. engineering did. There's this great notion here in Kansas City whenever I meet anyone, or even when they're introducing me for a speech or a panel, they talk about engineering this and that. Well, we're a mechanical contractor. We actually build buildings. So we've got plumbers, pipe fitters, sheet metal workers, laborers. We've got estimators. We do have engineers that do design, but we're literally builders. And I think our organization takes a great deal of pride in that. And so when I came back to get involved, for me, it was important to understand what exactly that meant. So I was able to work in the warehouse. I was able to work as a project engineer on some jobs under some extremely great project managers. I was then able to manage some of my own projects while also still being involved in the management capacity of U.S. engineering, because everybody knew that was the direction that I was going to be going. So there were a lot of people who jumped in and really helped me understand this is what it is to be a builder in this industry. And that was wonderful for me. I learned very early on what the value of good superintendents and field leadership was, but also how enthusiastic even young apprentices who were coming up through the trades were about what it was they were doing frankly, in an economy that is dominated by the services industry. Our team members, all of them, whether they work in the field or in the office, take a great deal of pride in being able to say, we actually helped build that building. And that was something that really was an important part of my early education at U.S. Engineering, which was almost like going back and getting a whole nother degree.
Yeah, well, so no doubt. And I appreciate you hitting on some of the points there of being a builder and what you do. I don't think anybody who listens to this is going to drive anywhere today and not see a U.S. engineering truck, sign, project you're working on. You guys are everywhere doing a lot of great things. For the audience, maybe could you talk a little bit about, back to the roots of 1893 and where it started to the breadth of project types you work on today? Because it's not just, you build a simple building. You've got a lot of high-tech stuff that you work on as well. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, if there's anything that I love, it's history. And I could go on for hours about the history of the company and spend a lot of time researching that. But my great-great-grandfather is the one who started U.S. Engineering technically as a metalworking shop in Cologne, Germany back in 1855. Then he and his wife, Margaret, and then their three sons moved to the United States in the late 19th century and set up a similar metalworking business here in Kansas City called Nottberg Machine Works. They actually settled over in Strawberry Hill, over in KCK, and they were fixing axles and ball bearings for the railroads, which was sort of a nascent industry, late 19th century, down there in the West Bottoms. And that business, as it evolved, turned into more mechanical construction. One of the sons had actually gotten a job at Heim Brewery, which is now on the same site where Andy Rieger and his team have built the Rieger Distillery, which is phenomenal. And we've kind of often joked about that. But when my great uncle was working there, they determined that they could move from metalworking into mechanical construction because a lot of the brewery industries or a lot of the brewery companies, as well as the meat packing companies, were using mechanical systems to keep things cold, to do refrigeration. And so they began to pivot and they reoriented their business towards something other than just metalworking, which was fantastic. The only issue was in the early 20th century, there were a lot of things German that kind of fell out of favor in the United States. And so they rebranded to US engineering, motherhood, apple pie, adopted the eagle as the logo. And over time, as mechanical systems became more complex, indoor plumbing became more common, we sort of rode that wave. And we built a lot of munitions factories during the wars, World War I, World War II. I've still got a great headline from back in the 1940s that was in the Kansas City Star that said, U.S. engineering makes hail for Hitler, because we were building the Sunflower ammunition plant. And so we did large projects even back then. And we continued to do a lot of that up through the 1950s and the 1960s and 70s, a lot of petrochemical work back then. But when you look around the city now, or the region, because we also have, a lot of jobs outside of Kansas City and a very large office in Denver, Colorado, and all up and down the Front Range of the Rockies there, you'll see that we build a lot of data centers. We build a lot of laboratories. We do a lot of higher education. We do a lot of healthcare work. We built, for example, the Performing Arts Center in downtown Kansas City and the Federal Reserve Bank. And we've done a lot of work at the University of Kansas Health System here in Kansas City, as well as a ton of work up in Lawrence. We've built the new National Bio and Agro Defense Facility out in Manhattan, Kansas, and we're building the new Kansas City International Airport. So in addition to all those large construction projects, you'll see our service vans running around doing break fix work if a chiller goes out or a boiler goes down, or we're doing a lot of work in preventative maintenance where we've got people in there all of the time, or even facilities management where we've got a bunch of people working 24/7 out at the National Nuclear Security Administration campus off of Botts Road, which we also built. So as you said, there's not a lot that we haven't been engaged with. And it's something I think every team member here takes a great deal of pride in.
That's amazing how you tied in history with what you do with your organization, project by project, and it being Kansas City focused, because we know you do so much throughout the country. One thing is when you came and spoke to a group of, I think it was 4 years ago, about 30, 40 CEOs that were younger, under the age of 40, and with Andy Rieger there. One thing that you really, that stuck with the group was you never used the word employee. You always talk about your partners or your associates. So one, the more that can get shared, because when a leader like yourself that does that, I think that speaks volumes to how other leaders should perform and act. So, what was your philosophy in terms of leadership when you got in the door, and how has your thoughts on leadership evolved to today?
Well, I tell you, one of the things I was most thrilled about when I got here was that we had a culture that was a little bit like a family. And, one of the things that I think you struggle to do, whether you're a young business owner or a small business owner and you're trying to grow your business, is how do you capture the good aspects of that without the bad aspects? And I joke with people as we've grown, there's been, plenty of instances where people have said, well, we feel a little bit more corporate. And I acknowledge that. And we've had to put processes in place, and there is some bureaucracy, but too much can be bad. And one of the things that I say is that, well, when you say we used to feel a little bit more like a family, everybody felt like they were in the know of everything going on, which gets more difficult as you grow as an organization. And the risk is that when you start talking about operating like a family, I sort of challenge people and say, hey, do you want our business to feel like that awkward family Thanksgiving dinner with the crazy uncle who's yelling weird stuff? And I said, no, that's not really what people mean by family. What they really mean is that they feel like they're respected as individuals, that they're given an opportunity to contribute in a way that's meaningful and that's recognized by other individuals. So, Scott, your question is something that I talk about all of the time. In fact, I host coffees with new hires now almost every month or every other month, where people get an opportunity to jump on a call just like this and ask questions. And I tell a little bit about the story, but one of the gimmicky aspects of that is that I get on and I say, I just want to make sure everybody understands that I hate employees. I hate the term employee is, of course, what I mean, because the term employee to me signifies some sort of transactional relationship that's a little bit depersonalized. And that means someone who comes in, does a particular job, we compensate you for that, you go home, you come back the next day, you do the same thing over, we pay you, et cetera. And when we think about what the culture is that we are trying to create or maintain or continue to invest in as an organization, and we talk about family, we talk about it more in terms of being a team member. Everybody knows that I refer to everybody in all of our companies as being team members. And if you've ever played a sport, or even if you haven't played a sport, maybe you've been on a debate team or you've just done something as a group, you remember what it feels like to be on a team where you are contributing, where you're all pulling for the same thing. And that concept is something that I think we are going to continue to try and work on building out within the organization or enhancing, so that subsets of teams really do feel like they're doing important work, and not just feel, but are told or shown you're doing important work. So it's important to feel like you're a part of that team. And there's really basic aspects of that. People feel like they're respected. People feel like their voices are heard. People feel like they are able to give feedback, and it's actually going to make change within the organization. And I will admit, I'll be the first one to admit, we do not do this perfectly by any stretch of the imagination at US Engineering or in any of our companies. But when we do get it right, it does get recognized as being done correctly. And it's really the core to our future, quite frankly. So like your question in my mind is the most important question, which is, how do people feel when they work at US Engineering? What are they able to contribute?
Yeah, I'll pass it to Will here, but this was a group, but 4 years ago, where everyone was emerging and getting ownership, and different companies are starting it. And using the word employee made myself or others feel important, but it was really putting other people down. And to see a leader that's achieved so much do that, I think it impacted that whole group and thousands of employees that now work at these companies. Will, I know you got tons of things going through your mind, because as you mentioned, you see US Engineering all over Kansas City. So it's got to be exciting. What are your thoughts in terms of questions you think the audience will have for Tyler?
Yeah. So Tyler, because there's such a vast kind of range of entrepreneurs to seasoned veterans and seasoned employees that are watching, one thing that's unique for everybody right now and common for everyone right now is we've got a lot of negative press in some ways. Inflation, rates are rising. There's supply chain pinch points, a lot of things that can disrupt a business. And so what my question to you would be, as the Chief Optimist at US Engineering, what will you say to those entrepreneurs that are maybe 6 months to 2 years in and experiencing this kind of challenge for the first time? What advice would you have for somebody in those shoes?
Well, I would say that one of the temptations that many leaders have to overcome, especially entrepreneurs who have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into getting their businesses started, is to try and figure out what is the context in which you can alleviate your own burdens from a decision-making standpoint by engaging others and asking good questions and obtaining great opinions and feedback. What are you doing to create an atmosphere where, as you try and find the best solution or the best decision about how to move forward, that you've engaged people both inside and outside of your business, in your personal life, in a way that helps you make a better decision. It doesn't mean that you don't have to be the one ultimately to make the decision, but a lot of the advice that I got early on in my career from a leadership standpoint is, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to dig a little bit deeper, because humility isn't about trying to figure out ways to put yourself down. It's obviously more about trying to figure out how you tap into and lift up other people's opinions, because the fact of the matter is, I love it when I'm not the smartest guy in the room. That means that I get to draw on other people's knowledge and experience. And so even if times are difficult, there's always going to be a path forward, and the sun's always going to come up the next day. So like the Chief Optimist title isn't supposed to signify that I ignore what some of the difficult things are that we have to deal with. It's more about trying to figure out, how do I make a decision with the information that I have today, knowing that it may be right, it may be wrong, but you know what? The sun is going to come up tomorrow and we're going to be fine. And we want to continue to push forward as a team. Otherwise, you tend to kind of get locked up or become a little bit more insular. And if you adopt that bunker mentality, then others can't be part of that solution. Does that answer? Is that?
No, I think that's great. Right? Don't be scared to ask questions, get opinions. And I'm worried your inbox is going to be full of people querying you for ideas or thoughts. So
one thing I take a great deal of pride in.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I take a great deal of pride in, even internally at US Engineering, people are, technology platforms are awesome. We use Microsoft Teams, and people absolutely feel free to kind of hit me up on Teams with a message, send me an email, send me a text. I really try and be responsive and communicative. The worst thing in the world is if there's an information vacuum. And so in a world where more people are, trying to communicate digitally, the concept of an open door policy is something that, sure, people feel free to walk into my office, but there are other ways to get in touch with me. And I try and be responsive. And by the way, if I don't have time or I'm full up, I'll still respond and say, it's just not something I'm able to do right now. Learning how to say no is an art form in and of itself too. I said yes to doing this, but Scott knows there are other things that I've had to turn down and say, I'm not going to have the time to do that, because when I do something, I'm going to put all of myself into it. I'm going to prep for it. I'm going to be ready. I'm going to try and provide value.
Well, and maybe to dovetail on that, and sorry to double up on you, Scott, but I want to bring this out too, because, we mentioned every road, all the signage of projects, U.S. Engineering's there, but the same comes true in the philanthropic world, where when you look at companies that are very supportive of different charities in Kansas City, U.S. Engineering seems to be on all the placards and lists of that as well. Recently, you and your wife Lee, were presented with the CASA, Jackson County CASA breakfast, and you chaired over the last year, if I understood correctly. Maybe talk a little bit about some of your philanthropic endeavors and the great work that you and Lee and the rest of the U.S. Engineering team are doing around town.
Absolutely. Well, and you're very right to point out. For example, we had 2 tables full of people supporting Go Red for Women yesterday, and that was great to see the U.S. Engineering team out there. We've had a long association with the American Heart Association, and Lee and I, in fact, we chaired the Heart and Stroke Ball 10 years ago, and it's something that our organization continues to support. She and I recently helped co-chair the capital campaign for Jackson County CASA, as well as the Light of Hope breakfast. And that's an organization here in Kansas City that does a great deal of work for abused and neglected children who are experiencing trauma in the foster care system. And so, if it's something you got time to look up Jackson County CASA and get involved. But we've done a lot of work with the University of Kansas Health System as well too. And that's something that we've got a passion for personally. Those issues are things we've got a passion for personally, in addition to, education issues and things that are going to help build a better, stronger community overall, because that's a community in which our business is going to be able to thrive and then be able to give back to. And that is the virtuous circle that I think we all recognize is important to help, as a community, allow us to continue to build on that momentum and that success. And when you look at the way in which the community came together, even during COVID, I had a great deal of pride for everything from frontline workers who are in the healthcare industry to educators who are trying to figure out how in the heck do we do things online, to just individuals who are trying to get masks in the right hands. Our community pulled together, and it was so representative of the spirit of the city. To me, it tended to reinforce, well, this is one of the reasons why we wanted to come back to Kansas City, is to have those kinds of opportunities and to be able to contribute in that way that benefits the business community. It benefits society. We don't shy away from difficult problems as as a city. Even though there's plenty that's wrong, I have a lot of confidence in people's willingness to engage. And so that for me is something that I take a great deal of pride in as a Kansas Citian.
Will, that is an amazing question. But the funny thing is as Tyler's talking, I'm like, we need like another 20 minutes to knock down every little thing that U.S. Engineering is doing in Tyler and his wife, Lee. Now, Tyler, you said one of the greatest things that ever happened to you was moving back to Kansas City. And then you quickly said marrying your wife was the greatest thing. And talking about things that you're doing for the national championship Jayhawks, you touched briefly on it, but do you want to talk a little bit about the projects you're doing in Lawrence, Kansas?
Well, we've got a series of separate companies, and one of them is U.S. Engineering Metalworks, which is a manufacturing company, and we're just getting ready in a couple of weeks to engage in a ribbon cutting ceremony. We're opening about a 200,000 square foot manufacturing facility, which is really focused on being able to enhance the amount of work that we are able to perform off-site so that we can both create a lot more efficiencies in the industry so that we can do larger projects, win larger projects, both here and outside of Kansas City. And when combined with about 150,000 square foot of manufacturing space that Metalworks has just north of Denver, that'll put us in the top tier of contractors who are really trying to drive change in an industry that it looks relatively similar to the way it did 4,000 years ago when the pyramids were being built. So we're excited about that. We're excited about being in the Lawrence community, and we're looking forward to opening up that facility. So if you're coming in off of 23rd Street, you'll see our big logo up there. It's not too far away from the old Don's Steakhouse. Those of you who remember where that was, in the new venture park there. So yep. We're excited.
Right when you get into town.
No, and I love how you also tie together big new logo. Our friends at Dimensional Innovations help you with that.
Absolutely. Tucker Trotter is the man.
And then Dive telling to pray to hearts.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we were very, Lee and I and U.S. Engineering were very proud of the work that Tucker and Dimensional Innovations and Jen Nussbeck and that whole team, University of Kansas Health System and everybody who was involved in that chase with Charlie Hustle to really bring an extraordinary event to the city that's really kind of helped bring people together. And we go around all the time right now. We say, oh my gosh, there's another heart. There's another heart. And you see people taking pictures with them. It's done a little bit what I talked about, which is it's helped enhance that pride that we all have in this city that we love. With all of its faults and problems, it's a city that we love and that we're all dedicated to trying to help, whether it's artists, whether it's, beneficiaries of the dollars that are being raised by that particular event. And that's just one other example, Scott.
That's awesome. Well, again, I really appreciate Will asking a question about the philanthropic work, because that could be another 30 minutes. And sincerely, I know everyone in Kansas City appreciates it. And also, Aaron and I want to make sure we say hi to Linda, who's your mother, who's been a mentor to both of us. Linda's been really good to me over the years, so I really appreciate it.
Hi, Mom. I always love it.
And Tyler, I know you're very, very open to sharing and helping others, but your time is very, very valued. And so thank you for saying yes to this show. And thank you to Bank of Blue Valley, and thank you to Burns and McDonnell, and thank you to all the companies like U.S. Engineering building Kansas City. And it's such a wonderful thing. Will, do you want to close us out?
I don't know how to top what we've already had. Tyler, just really appreciative of your time and this opportunity. I think you're the Kevin Bacon of Kansas City, right? You're one step or one person removed from everybody that we seem to work with. So
hey, Scott's not that far off, right? Like, he's also right, Aaron too. So thanks to the two of you and to Aaron for putting this together and having me on. Thank you.
We appreciate you.
All right, we'll have a great time, and thank you to all the listeners. Bye-bye.